program to bring you a special news bulletin.
Yesterday, December 7, 1941, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the Empire of Japan.
The attack apparently was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
The attack on Pearl Harbor united Americans as never before in history.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
At an ever-increasing pace, the veterans of World War II are saying their final goodbyes. In Arkansas, the Little Rock National Cemetery is the final resting place for many of that generation. Joanne George Taylor's father, Navy veteran Joseph Leonidas George, is buried here. Section 10, Plot 39A. Joe George saw enough war to last several lifetimes.
My father was your typical sailor, what you'd read about. He liked to go to bars and drink.
He was Old Navy, and he's a man of about 6 feet, about 213 pounds. He's a bosun's mate by that time. He's a pretty solid individual when it comes to the Navy. He's the old Navy, not the wartime Navy that's coming, the old Navy. And he was a boxer, and he had a way of settling things out his own way.
Joe George died in 1996. That's what the obituary in the Arkansas Democrat newspaper said. It also mentioned he was a veteran, had a couple of daughters, and was a loving husband of Thelma George for 51 years. It's pretty much the standard write-up for those of that age group who pass on. Short and to the point, no boasting, just the facts. It also indicated somewhat in passing that Joe George was a Pearl Harbor survivor. It's what this obituary didn't say that is the real story behind what then 26-year-old Joe George did in the heat of battle on Sunday, December 7th, 1941. In the opening moments of the Japanese attack on the United States Pacific Fleet in Hawaii, Joe George became a hero. You wouldn't know it from the simple final tribute to this local veteran, but Sailor Joe George's actions that horrific morning changed the course of history for many families.
I think the most important part about his life is how it came to this rendezvous with destiny.
Fast forward more than 75 years, and Joanne Taylor finds herself almost 4,000 miles from her Arkansas home on a Navy launch, heading out to the USS Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor. She is joined by family, friends, Pearl Harbor survivors, and Valor in the Pacific National Monument Chief, historian Daniel Martinez.
This is in his service jacket, too.
Dad had me, I wrote the National Archives and got all of his records.
This day is the culmination of a long journey. The final chapter of a story that brought together people from many varied backgrounds on a years-long mission. Their shared resolve was to see that a rambunctious, hard-drinking, hard-fighting sailor would not be forgotten for his courageous act at Pearl Harbor in the crucible of battle. On the morning of Sunday, December 7th, 1941, boatswain's mate, second class Joseph L. George, a native of Georgia, was aboard the USS Vestal on Battleship Row in Pearl Harbor. George had gotten in trouble on the night of December 5th for a drunken brawl in a rather seedy section of Honolulu, known as North Hotel Street. North Hotel is where most of the not-so-quaint B&Bs were located in 1941, the bars and brothels. George was confined to his ship most of that weekend.
The USS Vestal was berthed in Battleship Row on December 7th, 1941. She actually moved in on the 5th, Friday. She was a repair ship that was moored outboard of the USS Arizona to provide repair services to the battleship.
Yeah, he was proud of the Vestal. He loved his shipmates, and so he did like that part of the Navy.
Big George, he was a big boatsmate, and he nice guy. Everybody knew him, you know. Everybody kind of made him. He was, well, everybody knew him and everybody liked him.
If not for Joe George being restricted to the Vestal that morning along Battleship Row, many of the people on this launch headed out towards the USS Arizona Memorial for a first-of-its-kind ceremony would not exist. Family photo albums would be empty. Black and white snapshots of men in uniform would not have been taken in the days, months, and years following the Pearl Harbor attack. In several families, there would be no children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Generations would never have contributed to society in some way following World War II. The United States territory of Hawaii in 1941 was the place any soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine wanted to be. Some things haven't changed since those days. There may be many more buildings and people, but the beauty of the Hawaiian Islands remains. You just have to look a little deeper. But pre-December 7, 1941, Hawaii is still there if you want to find it. Right down to the bars on North Hotel, where the tattoo parlors and the somewhat less than family-friendly entertainment still flourishes. Waikiki Beach remains a favorite spot today, as it was in the early 1940s. The sun and sand, the perfect cure for a sailor or soldier's hangover. Honolulu was a major part of USS Vestal crewman Joe George's world in 1941, as it was for so many in the military stationed here. Young boys and men lived life to the fullest when on leave from their ships, airfields, or barracks on the island of Oahu.
We went to the bars, we went to the beaches in Hawaii and Waikiki.
Being able to go to Hawaii was something that was really far-fetched in my ideals of what was going on in the world, because I hadn't been that far away from home at that time.
Joe George was a fighter both inside and outside the ring. Inside the ropes, he found great success as an all-Navy boxer. George would fight on Friday nights in smokers. Smokers were boxing matches, and Joe George fought as an amateur heavyweight. Joe was solid muscle with fists of brass. He was so tough, Auburn University wanted him to come play football, but George chose the Navy. Joe George seldom lost a fight and was often featured in the newspapers for his success. The only interview Joe George ever gave regarding his time in the Navy came with Ron Marcello of North Texas State University in 1978. George told Marcello that he had a unique way of getting paid when he did win a fight, which was often.
Well, I've heard of the system. What sort of a prize would you normally get?
Well, watch or ring. They'd give you $5, they'd buy it back from you because you couldn't accept money. And in the Navy, amateurs couldn't accept money. So they would give you a watch and you'd buy it back from you. In the next fight program, they'd give you the same watch probably. Buy it back. I used to fight 2 or 3 times a week in various clubs. But it wasn't for the money, it was just the kicks.
Now, on a Saturday night in Honolulu, was there a great deal of drinking and carousing around?
Well, that's about all I'd say. If they had to do with it, for sure.
On Friday night, December 5th, 1941, Joe George was back in the ring.
Then, how'd you make out in that bout?
I won it by knockout.
After winning his smoker on the night of December 5th, USS Vestal crewman Joe George headed to the vicinity of North Hotel Street, where he found alcohol and trouble.
And then from there you hit the bars.
That's right, downtown Honolulu.
And as you mentioned, you had been drinking, and this was when you got into the fight with your buddy. Okay, so you got in this fight in the bar. Pick up the story from that point.
Well, I was picked up by the ship patrol, brought back to the ship. And let's see, this was Friday night, Saturday morning. I went to Captain's Mast Saturday morning. That's when he told me I'd like to take you on the forecastle. I don't want to beat the shit out of you. As soon as I can, I'll give you a summary court-martial. That was Captain Casson Young.
Since you were a prisoner at large, you couldn't get into any trouble on Saturday night. You spent Saturday night aboard the Vestal.
Right.
I think he probably was like that before my mother met him. Very social, had lots of friends, he drank, he got in fist fights. I can see him going to a bar and getting in a fight, and that's why, you know the story, that's why he was on the ship that night. It pulled in on Friday, and they were going to do repairs on the Arizona, and he went out on duty and got in a fight, and the MPs brought him back. But overall, he wasn't the kind of person that would get, like, MPs bringing him in and threatened to get court-martialed and things like that. So that's surprising when you find those things out or you read about them.
On Sunday, December 7th, 1941, Joe George was still confined to the USS Vestal following his run-in with the military police. It was 7:55 a.m. on an otherwise quiet Hawaiian morning. Some sailors on the Vestal were getting ready to have breakfast, go to church, or on leave. That was until crewmen aboard the adjacent USS Arizona noticed something happening on nearby Ford Island.
Some sailors were on the bow of the ship kind of yelling and hollering and pointed toward Ford Island. I went to have a look, and I thought, well, I seen the bombs drop on Ford Island and the Japanese insignia on the wings, and uh-oh, what's going on here? And I started for my battle station, which was about 5 ladders up on the foremast, and about that time they said, general reporters sounded, and this is no drill.
Alarms also started to sound aboard the USS Vestal. According to the action report by Vestal Commander Casson Young, General Quarters was sounded at 7:55 a.m. Joe George was topside on the Vestal doing some work when all hell broke loose along Battleship Row.
You did not hear anything outside at that time?
In fact, I jumped up. The first thing I saw was a Japanese plane coming down.
Shortly after, Vestal crew opened fire with anti-aircraft guns and machine gun fire directed at the attacking Japanese planes. The initial blast along Battleship Row knocked Casson Young and many of the Vestal crew into Pearl Harbor. Then the Vestal was struck by 2 bombs, which probably were intended for the USS Arizona. The first bomb went through 3 decks and started an explosion and fire on the repair ship. The second bomb left a 5-foot hole in the bottom of the Vestal's hull. An oil fire raged in the water between the Vestal and Arizona. Around 6 minutes past 8 a.m., after already taking several hits from Japanese bombs, the USS Arizona suffered its fatal wound.
One of the bombers came over the lucky bomb. It was an armor-piercing bomb. He dropped it from maybe 8,000 to 10,000 feet but it hit alongside of the number 2 turret forward on the starboard side. It went through 6 decks into the lower handling room where there was 1 million pounds of powder, and the bags are 105 pounds apiece.
We were being dive bombed and strafed by planes flying right out through by my battle station there, and you could see the pilots and everything, and then the big bomb hit the starboard side right after number 2 turret and went right into 1 million rounds of ammunition and fuel oil and aviation gasoline, and it blew 110 foot of the ship clear off, and number 1 turret blew up into the air and settled right back down, and it's still there today.
The bow of the ship came out of the water about 30 feet. There was a lieutenant commander who was in a lifeboat out in the ship coming back from base, and told me one time, he said, Clyde Ernst, he said, Lou, I could look under the bow of the ship. It was up that high, and it settled straight back down in the water. It was all aflame from the mainmast forward.
The USS Vestal had taken blows of its own during the Japanese attack. And now, what was left of the Arizona was raining down on the old repair ship.
Yeah, I knew that they was bombing the Arizona. When the first Jap come over our ship, he's open cockpit, and he kind of smiled or waved at me and went on his way. And
the horizontal bombing attack had begun, and they were next to the Arizona when she exploded. Debris ran all over the ship, pieces of the ship and pieces of people. And so that was present, and that the explosion was so horrific it knocked people overboard. The captain, Casson Young, who will later receive the Medal of Honor, has to rally his men in the water and get them to swim back to the ship and save the ship. And so in that moment of just catastrophe and confusion, they ordered to cut away from the Arizona. They're just getting blistered, literally. The paint on the side of the Vestal is blistering up, and they're in danger themselves catching fire. So he's ordered to go down and cut the lines.
Well, I heard the Arizona blowing up. Then I seen all the planes coming up down the Arizona, and from stern to bow and coming across in front of our bow. My ship was a lot smaller like that up there. There was a lot smaller in the Arizona, so we had the Arizona stuck out on both sides, in bow and stern from us. Magazines blowed up and everything, is booming and making loud noises. I don't know, just so much noise going on at the time that it was just a lot of racket.
Well, as I said, I didn't believe such thing could happen.
Commander Young ordered all lines connecting the USS Vestal to the USS Arizona be cut so the Vestal could pull away from the burning battleship. By this time, men on the Arizona were either off the ship or were trying to swim to Ford Island through the burning, oily water. The rest were probably dead, having been vaporized by the blast in the forward part of the battleship, or cremated from the intense fire and heat below, or on the Arizona's decks. Only 335 of the battleship's over 1,500-man crew would live to see Sunday night. On the USS Vestal, Joe George wielded a large axe and had started to cut the thick rope lines that held the Vestal and the Arizona together. But something caught George's attention from the Arizona's portside anti-aircraft gunfire director position shown here. Crewmen also called it the Sky Control Platform. 6 severely burned sailors were miraculously somehow still alive on the battleship, despite flames surrounding their location high above the waterline.
You hunkered down, you moved here, you moved there, you moved around someplace else just to keep from the flames and getting to you, and there wasn't nothing you could do about it, but trying to self-preservation was about it.
The 6 Arizona crewmen fighting for their lives were Seaman First Class Donald Stratton, Seaman First Class Harold Kuhn, Seaman First Class Russell Lott, Gunner's Mate Third Class Earl Reiner, Fire Controlman Third Class Lauren Bruner, and Boatswain's Mate Second Class Alvin Dvorak. This is the only known photo of Dvorak prior to his joining the Navy a few years later. As the smoke cleared for just a few seconds between Vestal and Arizona, Joe George saw the 6 trapped men.
And so in that process, he hears something. And he looks across at the Arizona and he sees individuals. He didn't know how many, but he saw maybe 3 or 4 individuals trying to hail him. And the fires are all around these guys. And they're up on a level where the gun director is.
Around that same time, USS Vestal's executive officer ordered Joe George to continue cutting all the large rope lines between the 2 ships. Joe George looked back at the 6 desperate Arizona men yelling at him. Despite being given a direct order and the ongoing Japanese attack in Pearl Harbor, Joe George was not going to leave those men on the Arizona to die. George refused to follow the order to cut the lines. He put the axe down.
Little did he know who those people were, but he decided on his own to not cut the lines.
Joe George knew what he had to do. He had to find a heaving line that would be attached to a long, thick rope that could hold the weight of the trapped men on the Arizona. They would use that heavy rope to get across to the Vestal.
Don Stratton and Lauren Bruner were on the mainmast up in the foremast up in the fire controlman tower.
Well, after we got the burns, or the fireball kind of went down, and the breezes kind of blowed away the smoke and everything, we went out on deck on the sky control platform, and no way to get out of there. The deck was all hot, was so hot, and going down 5 or 6 ladders to get to the main deck, or the boat deck. So we were all out on the platform there, and we seen a gentleman on the vessel, on the aft part of the vessel, and we got his attention and hollered and whatever, and he seen us over there, and he threw us a heaving line.
And this is a heaving line. It's called a monkey fist. And Joe George took this, and this would be tied to a heavier line, and took it and threw it 70 feet and got there to the first try. That's what Stratton said. Now what happens with this weighted line, which is like a baseball, is it's tied to a heavy line. And the guys knew what this was. Every sailor knew it. And they began pulling, and that's what they pulled a heavier line off, tied it off on the railing by the gun director.
Well, I can see it. He was frantically trying to get help to get the lines over to us. And I said, finally, maybe we can get off this way. There's no other way to get off. Well, the skipper told him to chop the lines so he gets the ship underway, save the ship. And George said, nope, you're going to save the men first. He was a fighter, so he had good muscles on him, but he was not a tall, big guy.
And Joe George threw it nearly 70 feet to get to those guys, and he did it in one try. Only a man of that strength could have done that, and probably a little adrenaline.
The guy was, I guess, was with his compatriots, was probably one of the strongest men that they'd seen for a long time, and that's the only reason he got that line across with a heavier line for us to get off, because he could heave that heaving line over there with that metal, or that keep it on a straight line. We knew that somebody threw us a line, So we tied over the top of the top one, over onto the bottom one, and put a clove hitch and a half hitch, and that was it.
Now everybody thinks the story ends there. It doesn't. It just begins because they have to go over a burning ship over 70 feet, and in the meantime, they're being burned by the heat. It's like going over a barbecue.
You were midships anyway. You couldn't jump that far into the water. That was the only option we had. We had to go across the line first, and that was about probably 65, 70 feet or so, hand over hand, and there were 6 of us there. We stood there because we couldn't sit down, we couldn't do anything because we were all burnt to hell.
Arizona sailor Harold Kuhn was the first to go across to test the line. He was followed by Don Stratton, then fellow crewman Russell Lott, and Earl Reiner. Loren Bruner was the second to the last to leave the Arizona, followed by his best friend and the most severely wounded of all the 6 sailors, Alvin Dvorak. Below them, the water was on fire from leaking oil. The flames grabbed at the sailors' backs as they crossed. Japanese planes strafed the Vestal as the men went across the line one by one from the Arizona.
There were 6 of us there. We had this fellow on the Vestal get a line over to us, and we went scrambling across that line like a bunch of monkeys.
And so Joe George goes from a guy that has a habitual problem of fighting and using his fists and drinking maybe a little too hard to an unsung hero that was forgotten in history.
Didn't know we were going to get it off or not.
We just thought we were trapped, and that was it. Kuhn had long whites on, and he hadn't been burned like the rest of us. So he went across the line first to make sure that it was steady enough to hold us when we were going across hand over hand. I mean, you have to say to yourself, I can make it, I can make it, I can make it. And we went probably 70 or 80 feet across that line to get to the vessel. And it was started out about 55 foot in the air. And when we got to the downside of the line, why then you had to, with your weight and everything, you had to go back up. So it was pretty tough.
Don Stratton heard Joe George shouting encouragement from the Vestal as he crossed.
Here he was up there. Come on, sailor, you can make it. You can make it. Come on, give me your hand.
Loren Bruner and his best friend Alvin Dvorak were the last men to get off the USS Arizona alive, thanks to Joe George.
I got off the ship just ahead of him. He was the last man.
Now, do you recall when you threw that line over to the Arizona?
I was on a superstructure deck. I was up in the area where the steering shop was, because that part of the deck was about the only part of the deck was even with the Arizona. The Arizona, although her main deck was about maybe lower than ours, she grew more wear. But the particular places these people were trying to get over, they were surrounded by fire in Arizona. This was on the main deck, or rather the superstructure deck. The vessel was in correspondence with the level and height. They were stranded over on the ship, and they were trying to get off, and they were surrounded by fire.
And so this is when you threw the line over?
That's correct.
And how many people came across in that line, do you know?
I'll tell you, I didn't wait to see, because I secured it on my ship as tight as I could. And they foreheaded themselves over, so I couldn't help them.
It sounds like something my father would do because he was a very strong man, strong-willed man. He was going along doing what he was trained to do because they all had their battle stations and knew what they were supposed to do. So to think that my father, would do that, throw a line to a ship like that and all that, and you think of your father as a hero as a kid. You certainly never think of your father as a hero in a life before you were born, or being a different person in a different time. My father was in as much jeopardy as they were doing what he was doing. He was already putting fires out and doing things before the moment in time occurred where he had to throw that rope up to them and help them. And I can't imagine the horrors that those people, you know, their skin falling off, walking on a deck that's so hot that their boots were melting. I mean, look what was the chaos and the horror that was going around. I mean, it had to become about survival and fighting back and survival in that horrible moment in time that, I mean, they just had to click into survival mode and those kind of things.
George wasn't going to turn loose that rope until he got us all safe off of it.
The one man laying down on the blister gasping, he was on fire. He was gasping for air. He was still alive, no doubt.
After the last badly burned Arizona sailor Alvin Dvorak had made it across the rope, USS Vestal crewman Joe George used his axe to sever the thick main lines holding the repair ship alongside the Arizona.
The ropes were about 4 inches thick, like this, you know, and he had the axe and he's chopping them lines off so it got away.
How did you cut those lines?
With a fire.
And the sinking Vestal makes its way from the Arizona right across from here and just past us to Ayers Shoals.
There were people on the ship that would tell that story. Probably when I went to one of the reunions, people talking about folklore kind of thing that you can't say were factual, but this might have happened or that might have happened. I've talked to so many people now that I know this story that knew about this happening. He didn't tell me, or Mother didn't tell me. My sister and I didn't know. My father was 26.
The Japanese second wave was still attacking as the 6 survivors were taken away in small boats. The burned USS Arizona crewmen, alive thanks to Joe George, were immediately transferred off the Vestal for treatment.
And the Arizona guys that are there, many of them are transferred to the hospital ship Solace or taken to the Naval Hospital. We don't know that in the log it doesn't talk about that, but it's pretty interesting that they had so much going they probably couldn't even fathom details. They were getting their men that were wounded and they had suffered dead themselves and they were getting them to the hospital.
Everybody was hurting, everybody was doing this, everybody was doing that. The nurses kind of figured out that they had to do something to segregate everything, so they got lipstick and they marked on some of the guys' foreheads that this is, take care of this right away, this one can wait, this one, we can't do anything for this gentleman. Then they marked to give you a morphine shot, and so you didn't get 2 or 3 or 4 morphine shots for the pain, and that's the way they took care of a lot of that.
I was in the hospital for 7 months.
He saved 6 men's lives.
Joe George never saw any of those guys again.
Boatswain's mate, second class Alvin Dvorak, was the only Arizona sailor not to survive Joe George's heroic actions that morning. Dvorak died from his severe burns around Christmas 1941. Seaman First Class Harold Kuhn, Seaman First Class Russell Lott, Gunner's Mate Third Class Earl Reiner, Seaman First Class Donald Stratton, and Fire Controlman Third Class Lauren Bruner would all live. Something Joe George never knew.
I heard a story later that after he made the statement, said, "Did you help those sailors off the Arizona?" He says, "I sure did, but we got about 6 of them aboard here, but I'm not sure that they're still alive."
Following the attack at Pearl Harbor, USS Vestal Commander Casson Young wrote a short paragraph in his logbook, recognizing Joe George for his role on December 7th, 1941. The report was generic in nature and made no mention of any disobeyed order. Casson Young was later killed during the Battle for Guadalcanal, so the log entry was forgotten, and that was the end of it.
One of these books is written about Pearl Harbor, the unknown sailor in a vessel throwing the line over to the Arizona sailor. The author didn't find the right guy to ask the question.
And were you the guy who threw the line over?
I'm the guy, yeah.
Was written in the log, deserving a commendation, and never acted upon. And it was written by Casson Young. And so that officer saw it, remembered it. It's interesting to note that had it not been for the Arizona survivors recalling that story, Joe George would have been lost to history.
He saved 6 men's lives, he didn't get nothing. Don't seem fair, really.
Joe George went on to serve throughout the rest of World War II on an additional 4 other ships besides the Vestal. He remained in the Navy until 1955. George seldom, if ever, spoke about December 7, 1941, and what he saw and did during the attack on Pearl Harbor.
I don't even remember it being mentioned at all in my mother and my sister's life. What I remember is that we just went along normal life and nothing was ever discussed about the war, but we knew he was, of course, he was in the Navy till I was in the 3rd grade. So we knew he was in the Navy and we knew he was at Pearl Harbor in the war, and that's about it. And my mother and my daddy definitely didn't talk about it. And probably I was way older, maybe my 50s or something before, I think really when I got the full picture of everything that happened.
However, there were sailors aboard the USS Arizona who never could forget the USS Vestal crewmen who saved their lives in the opening moments of the attack that Sunday morning in Hawaii. They were alive because Joe George's compassion overruled a direct order from a superior officer. They just didn't know their rescuer's name. Donald Stratton was burned over roughly 70% of his body when the Arizona exploded into a fireball on December 7, 1941. When he got off the Vestal and to a Navy hospital, this is what his body looked like, according to a recreation of the burns and wounds he suffered. It isn't pretty, but it is the reality of how severely injured the final 6 men to get off the battleship were. Donald Stratton, who survived that morning thanks to Joe George, spent a year in the hospital, but returned to fight again in World War II. Stratton went on to have a large family with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He would always wonder who that sailor was who rescued the final 6 men off the USS Arizona during the height of the attack on Pearl Harbor. He never got the USS Vestal crewman's name or saw him ever again. December 7, 1941 was just too chaotic for introductions. If Joe George hadn't disobeyed an order, Donald Stratton's family would not exist. Lives would not have been lived. It was the same for the other 5 Arizona survivors who were rescued. Like his father, Donald Stratton's son, Randy, had always wondered who had saved his dad and the other Arizona sailors. So as the 21st century dawned, Randy felt it was finally time to do some serious digging. Randy Stratton also believed this heroic USS Vestal sailor warranted more than just a thank you from the families of the survivors. He also deserved a medal for his heroics at Pearl Harbor, something he never received. A vague commendation in an old logbook was not going to suffice.
What do you do for somebody who saves your dad's life? What do you do? I mean, you want to honor them. That's what we wanted to do.
Well, there was just an inner circle that talked about this sailor that threw the line and whatever, and we got a second chance at life. He helped you get it. I mean, if it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't be here today. talking about this. We're lucky to be alive, and we're lucky to have a family, and we're lucky that we're still here on Earth.
Around the 60th anniversary of the attack in 2001, the search for Pearl Harbor's unknown hero ramped up for the Stratton family. With help from Daniel Martinez at the Valor in the Pacific National Monument and the Arizona Reunion Association, the Strattons eventually learned their heroic sailor's name on the USS Vestal that morning was Joe George, and he lived somewhere in the United States. Well, it was a start. Dozens of phone calls were made. Hundreds of internet searches were undertaken. All of the inquiries resulted in dead ends, until a lead finally materialized. Randy Stratton came across the name Joe George in Arkansas. A message was left on an answering machine, and fingers were crossed. 2 weeks later, Randy Stratton's voice message was returned. Thelma George was on the other end of the line. And yes, she was married to a sailor named Joe George, who served aboard the repair ship USS Vestal at Pearl Harbor. The Strattons had found their Joe George. Their relation was short-lived as Thelma broke the sad news that her husband had passed away 5 years earlier. Following World War II, Joe and Thelma married and had 2 daughters, Frances Lou and Joanne, both of whom had little idea that their father was one of the heroes of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.
I don't really know when all the stories started coming out, and I knew about Randy Stratton, who he was, and that his father was on the Arizona, because his mother would say that.
The years ticked by. Randy Stratton would call Thelma George every December 7th with updates on his efforts to get Joe George that medal. Stratton, however, could gain no traction or momentum in his efforts. Thelma George passed away in 2015. It was then that Joanne George Taylor picked up the torch to help the Stratton family in their mission to get her father a medal for his heroics at Pearl Harbor. At the beginning, Joanne had no idea the impact her father had had on future generations of the families of the men he had saved, such as Arizona crewman Donald Stratton.
Yeah, because that's my three grandkids. I mean, I wouldn't be here. My brother wouldn't be here. My 2 sisters wouldn't be here. I mean, all those things go through your mind when you look at how overwhelming that it was that Joe stepped forward to the brave. How many guys, I look back and I think, when you look out over there and you think, wow, just think what that would have been like that day, of all the fire and then him being burned as bad as what he was, and Joe didn't have to do what he did, but he stepped forward. How many people step forward? There's not very many that'll do that, and he's one that did.
To Randy Stratton, Joe George, that rambunctious, hard-drinking, hard-fighting, and hard-headed sailor aboard the USS Vestal, was a hero any way you looked at it. And not just because one of the men he saved that day was Donald Stratton.
I'm old enough to know that, when you're in that period of your life, you can do rebellious things, and you can regret them, but you do them, and he did. Randy said that to me. He said, Joanne, it's part of who he is and what makes him the man that he is. And when I thought about that and gave it thought, he's completely right. I mean, that's just part of the man that made him be the one that wanted to rescue those men, isn't it? And the Strattons, they're this wonderful family, and I just think, oh my goodness, my father saved that life for that man, and it is completely overwhelming. And you know, to read their books and hear about their lives, you know what it does? It makes me, I love the Strattons, and it has made me bond with them in a way where I just love them. To think that, you know, first off, that my father rescued that wonderful man. My father was the most unpretentious man. He wore dungarees all the time, those Navy things. He always bought them at the PX and he always wore Navy regulation jeans. And my mother would try to get him to dress up, and that was a hard thing to do. My father was a very simple man that way. No, he would not like recognition.
We're here on account of him. And my sons and my family and my granddaughters and whatever. And I'm still alive.
Early in the process, Randy Stratton and his family discovered that wanting a medal for Joe George and actually getting one would not be as easy as they thought. There were many factors at play, one being the need for an official eyewitness statement from an officer on the USS Vestal. None were still alive. Another issue was the military politics of awarding a medal to a man who wasn't exactly a poster boy for model Navy behavior. Joe George had, after all, disobeyed an order from a commanding officer, despite the fact that he saved 6 lives on December 7th, 1941.
And that's probably not the kind of person they want to say, good job. Good job, guy. They got to put that aside, though, and see the act that he did. To me, that's what they should do.
The Strattons' pursuit of a medal for Joe George continued to hit political and military roadblocks, right up until the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack in 2016. By this time, roughly 15 years had passed since Randy Stratton first began his mission. United States Navy Lieutenant Junior Grade Matt Previtz, who had heard the story of Joe George from someone, met the Stratton family in Hawaii. He felt strongly that Joe George did indeed deserve recognition for his courage at Pearl Harbor and for saving the last 6 sailors off the USS Arizona. He promised to help the Strattons navigate the military and political beltway in Washington, D.C. He also felt a visit to the nation's capital for Joanne Taylor, the Arizona families, and 2 of the final 6 survivors to get off the battleship alive that Sunday morning might move the award needle forward. Meetings with the right people in both military and political circles would go a long way in putting Joe George's story at the top of some key agendas.
There's an emotional power to this story, but there's also enough factual parts and pieces to make the case for it. So now it's just figuring out the right way to move the pieces. All the pieces are together. Now you have to make the puzzle work. So I believe it's close.
On a beautiful summer's day in Washington, D.C., and with a Capitol Police motorcade, the last-ditch effort to get Joe George his long-sought-after medal began. When USS Arizona survivors like Don Stratton and Lauren Bruner are in town, D.C. rolls out the red carpet. There's a visit to the National World War II Memorial.
Everybody had a place to be. Everybody had to be someplace. That's what put it all together, and this is the outcome. But we lost a lot of people.
It was down to business quickly for the Arizona survivors as their motorcade wound its way to Capitol Hill. First up, a meeting with Cory Gardner, a United States Senator from Stratton's home state of Colorado.
Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your incredible service to our country. And so, what a pleasure it is, an honor it is to have you here in this office, and to know that you are living legacies of freedom and everything this country stands for. We got to make this happen. Tell me a little bit about Joe.
He was probably the only guy who could have got that line over to us, and we went across and he'd say, "Come on, kid, you can make it. Come on, kid, you can make it."
This is, I mean, you think about what that day has meant to our country and your service, and the fact that we can talk about that moment today and Joe and his family here means so much to all of us.
But we try to forget it and get on with our lives, but it always comes back.
Maybe he wasn't the best person in the world that you think he is, but what he did is what he did, and that was save 6 people's lives that went on to have a whole life. I mean, these men are 95 and 96. They went on to have a whole full life because my father did that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. But inside of me, I'm just beyond thrilled that they're willing to speak up, and that they're willing to get on an airplane at their age and fly to Washington. That has to be exhausting to them, to do that, to try to tell people that can make a decision about that, look, he deserves this, give him a medal, he deserves to be recognized for them. And that's overwhelming to me, and I appreciate it.
Down the hall from Gardner's office is the office of Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, who represents the state bearing the name of the survivors' battleship.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
It's an honor for me to be here and to receive you in the office here. So it's important to you that this man receive the honors that he's due.
Absolutely.
It's long overdue.
Long.
Another fellow Arizona crewman, Ken Potts, had also joined the others in Washington to aid their efforts to honor Joe George. Following their Capitol Hill visit, the Arizona survivors then laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for being here.
After Arlington came one of the most important stops for the families and survivors on their trip to Washington, D.C. to seek support for their Joe George medal effort, the Pentagon. There, for the first time in the memory of those who worked inside this massive building, hundreds of military members lined the hallways to welcome and honor the handful of remaining USS Arizona crewmen still living. At the Pentagon, the survivors and family met with Secretary of Defense General James Mattis, as well as with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Chief of Naval Operations. There, they shared the story of Pearl Harbor's unknown hero.
They ask for nothing, which is why you just want to give them everything. And I think the power of the story here is that they're not seeking this recognition. They didn't make this trip for themselves. They're heroes. They've defended our nation. They've bled for us. And so they deserve to be recognized, but they don't want the recognition for them. They want it for Joe, which, if you think about it, it took them 50 years to find Joe, and now they spent 25 trying to recognize him. And at 95 and 96, they're willing to make the trek here just to make the case. I think that's a very powerful story about selflessness, right? And about sacrifice and about honor, courage, and commitment, which is really what the Navy's all about.
All the military and everybody was standing around clapping when we were walking through the Pentagon there. And there's a lot of other people that deserve that more than I, but we'll enjoy it and make the most of it on the time.
Following the Pentagon visit came the survivors' final stop of the day, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House. the group settled into the Roosevelt Room for a briefing with staff. After that, it was a few short steps into the Oval Office where the man of the Arizona and Team Joe George met with the President of the United States.
Today it's my distinct privilege to welcome to the White House 3 of the 5 living survivors of the USS Arizona. Lauren Brunner and Donald Stratton were on the deck of the USS Arizona doing their duty when the ship was engulfed by massive flames. They were both fortunate enough to be rescued by another courageous hero, Joe George, whose daughter Joanne is with us today.
The president doesn't have to see us, and the senators didn't have to see us today. So if they listen to the story, good, and I hope it goes into their heart the way those men want it to, because you can watch them and see sincerely they want that to happen.
This is considered one of the shortest commutes in D.C.
A personal tour of the White House followed the group's visit with President Trump.
This room is called the map room. It's called the map room because this is where President Franklin Roosevelt basically monitored and planned World War II from this room. On this wall, there's a watercolor and oil painting of what the room would have looked like. The walls, the exterior walls would have been lined with campaign maps, maps of Europe, maps of the Pacific. It was inspired by the war rooms that Winston Churchill had in London, England.
One of the most spectacular days I've ever spent in my whole life.
Don and Velma, they don't like to go anywhere anymore. And I know why he's doing this, because I know them now very well. And they don't like to travel and go places anymore. So for them to get in a car, they drove 2 hours, fly on an airplane all the way across the country to tell somebody, please give this man a medal he deserves. I mean, that's just phenomenal when you think about it.
A quick stop at Fort Myer wrapped up the USS Arizona Survivors Tour.
Does anyone know what the comparison horse, riderless horse is?
In these stables live the horses who lead the funeral processions at Arlington, where tens of thousands of World War II veterans are buried.
This trip was about Joe George and about bringing the survivors together again, because none of them had ever been here. Seeing the nation's capital, seeing the monuments that are here, and paying respects to those that are honored here, both at Arlington and with the other monuments.
Their time in Washington, D.C. over, now came the waiting and wondering. Was the effort in Washington worth it? Would someone in the military or on Capitol Hill step up to see that Joe George was finally recognized for his heroic actions aboard the USS Vestal on December 7, 1941?
You write your senator, your congressman, and they say, good job, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And then somebody writes you a letter back and says, but nothing, it kind of stops, you know what I mean? So you do get frustrated, and kudos to Randy Stratton for continue to trying and trying and trying. But it's not easy because you get very discouraged.
Committed to honoring Joe and why I raised.
As the weeks following their trip to Washington passed, there were small signs of progress. A resolution on the floor of the Senate by Arizona's Jeff Flake.
And it is long overdue that the Senate, the United States Navy, and a grateful nation honor the heroism of Bosun Mate Second Class Joe Leon George.
The hope was, if all went well, to have a medal presentation on the USS Arizona on the anniversary date in December. But that was now looking very doubtful. It took one final appeal from USS Arizona survivor Donald Stratton to move the ball forward. Stratton invited Colorado Senator Cory Gardner to his Colorado Springs home in the fall for a final pitch.
So on this Veterans Day, one vet in Colorado Springs got a special visit from Senator Cory Gardner.
Gardner left Stratton's house with a promise that he would try to get things moving again with the military and his fellow politicians. The senator did.
I mean, Don wants this a lot. It is like, have you been listening to me all these years? I'm trying to tell you why I'm here and who saved me. And he's been saying that for a long time. And he wants to be heard. That's why he's out here. I know that. And I so appreciate that.
Just before Thanksgiving, Joanne Taylor received a phone call from the Chief of Naval Operations, Awards Branch. The Navy had finally approved a medal for USS Vestal Boatswain's Mate 2nd Class Joe George, that rebellious sailor who disobeyed an order to cut the lines from his burning ship to the USS Arizona on December 7, 1941, and by doing so, saved the lives of the last 6 men to get off the battleship. Joe George would be posthumously awarded the Bronze Star with a V attached for valor. All the years of persistence had been rewarded. The ceremony at Pearl Harbor was now officially on.
I tell you, I'm almost numb. I'm really almost numb because it just all seems so real.
I mean, 16 years of waiting, it was well worth it.
On an early December morning, Joanne Taylor's family, the Strattons, and Lauren Bruner left for Hawaii to see the completion of their final mission as crewmen aboard the USS Arizona. It would be a first at Pearl Harbor.
You know, I've often said it's one thing to write about history and research history. It's quite another to witness it. For the first time, a medal will be given to a World War II veteran who's no longer here. His daughter will accept it. But it's going to be done on the USS Arizona Memorial. And to our recollection, that has never been done.
Since this would be the final time USS Arizona survivors would return as a group to Hawaii, the long goodbye would include many events, both formal and informal.
Attention on deck!
Some of the lighter moments included Lauren Bruner's return to the official hangout of the Arizona crew prior to December 7, 1941, Smith's Union Bar in Honolulu, the island's oldest drinking establishment. There, on North Hotel Street, he met up with one of the few other crewmen still alive from the battleship, Lou Conter. Memories of the Arizona still line the walls of the old dive on North Hotel Street. The men of Arizona had many beers in this old place. Today, the few survivors return as honored guests.
All right, family, welcome to Blue Hawaiian Helicopters. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able.
Lauren Bruner and Don Stratton also took in one last aerial view of the Arizona and its memorial with a helicopter tour around Pearl Harbor. There were also book signings, where Don Stratton and Lauren Bruner autographed copies of their own individual accounts of December 7th, 1941, both of which include Joe George's story. But the real reason these Arizona survivors had returned to Pearl Harbor one last time was to honor Joe George, the man who had saved their lives. So late in the afternoon, on the anniversary of the December 7, 1941 attack, there was one last ceremony on the agenda for the USS Arizona survivors. The Stratton family, Joanne George tailored her own relatives and invited guests. It was finally time, thanks to the efforts and determination of so many, for USS Vestal crewman Joe George to posthumously receive his long overdue medal in recognition of his heroics at Pearl Harbor.
And so an incident that occurred 76 years ago is now going to be, well, it's going to be noted as part of a history that unfolds on that memorial when the medal is given to the daughter. And at that moment, amends are going to be made today. His family will get the medal that he richly deserved. And history will be made, and it won't be forgotten.
And thank you all for being here, and we look forward to a memorable event here in a few moments.
After all these years, Joanne George Taylor's father, Joseph L. George, will be awarded a Bronze Star with V for valor. Sitting in the front row will be two of the men he saved that horrific day off the burning USS Arizona, Donald Stratton and Lauren Bruner. Fellow crewman Lou Conter joins them. The few surviving sailors of the Arizona are about to see their resolve come to fruition.
We're gathered in this very solemn place to recognize the heroism of a man who, for many years, was only known by his actions to 6 USS Arizona sailors. Chief Boatswain's Mate Joseph Leon George's actions have stood the test of time, and through the work of many, have brought us all here together today. For the first and likely only time, a Valor Award will be conferred here at the USS Arizona Memorial. Most fittingly, the award will be bestowed upon a sailor from the USS Vestal who, on that day of infamy, was guided by his conscience and saved the lives of Seaman First Class Harold Kuhn, Seaman First Class Russell Lott, Gunner's Mate Third Class Earl Reiner, Boatswain's Mate Second Class Alvin Dvorak, Seaman First Class Donald Stratton, and Fire Controlman Third Class Lauren Bruner. The effort of so many has brought us together here in this sacred space. A day like this has never been seen before, nor will ever be seen again.
Tonight is not just another ceremony, as if there could ever be such a thing as just another ceremony at Pearl Harbor. Just when you think that something couldn't be more special, we come together this evening. And so welcome to all of you. It is the National Park Service's extreme honor to host, as you've pointed out, an incredibly historic day that may never happen again. And it's a day where I am reminded about doing the right thing. Even when somebody's telling you it's not the right thing, when somebody's telling you not to do it, but you know in your heart of hearts it's the right thing to do, and that you couldn't live with yourself if you did anything else. And so you pick your battle, and you get ready to stand for that battle and take the consequences later, if there are consequences to come. And you do the right thing. And then, when there are no consequences, but yet the recognition that you should have received for doing the right thing was not quite what it should have been. And your friends go, and they say, that's not right. There should be more recognition. And they're told, no, there was a commendation. Disobeyed an order. You all didn't listen either. And that is another example of doing the right thing.
7 December 1941, 4 to 8 watch. The first thing noted, 7:55, surprise air attack by Japanese planes. Sounded general quarters. 8 o'clock, all guns manned, including 30 caliber machine guns. 8:05, open fire with 3 AAA guns, machine guns, Japanese planes and bombers and torpedo planes making runs. 8:30, Arizona was observed to be settling. Fuel oil in the water between the Arizona and Vestal ignited. Vestal's afterlines parted, making preparations to getting underway. 8:45, cut forward lines underway on both engines, no steering gear. Tug pulled Vestal's bow away from the Arizona, Vestal starting to list to the starboard, taking water aft. But something else happened. Something that wasn't in that decalogue. Commended by the commanding officer for outstanding services rendered during the attack on the USS Vestal by the Japanese planes on 7 December 1941. As a member of the deck force in the forward and aft part of the ship, aided men from the USS Arizona, which was afire, in getting over to the Vestal and assisted in this vessel getting clear of the Arizona. That's what that looked like. Don told me his story, and he said, you know, we were burning up there. And they were badly burned, and they really didn't know how bad. But they knew one thing: if they didn't get off that platform, they were not going to make it. They would have been consumed by the flame. They hollered at a man that was aft on the Vestal to get his attention, which they did. It was Joe George, bosun's mate. But how would they get to him? They were 40 feet in the air, nearly 70 feet across. Now, how Joe George threw this 70 feet in one throw is because the man was a boxer, both in the bar and outside the bar. And when he showed me this monkey fist, this was life. So, their story, and I'll bring this out to them, and let you hold it during the ceremony. Is part of history that they knew, and the men that saved them through that line. And today we honor them.
I can't imagine being trapped on the USS Arizona while it was engulfed in fire. Minutes must have felt like an eternity. For a single moment, time stood still. In what can only be accounted as divine intervention, the big man from Georgia threw a lifeline to 6 men he never knew. Fast forward 16 years from that day, and we find ourselves in the conversation again. Even now the words echo in my mind. A guy saved my grandpa. For more than half my life, that's what Joe was. A guy. A nameless, faceless hero that I can only thank every night in my prayers. The question was always asked, well, who was he? And always our answer was, if we only knew. We always wondered who the guy was, but in the chaos of December 7th, we weren't really sure if there would be an official record of what happened. And he was pretty sure that none of the men that crossed the line survived. He said that the men looked like ghosts, burnt, blackened from head to toe, only the whites of their eyes visible. A truly ghoulish and unsettling sight, to be sure. We learned that Joe passed away in 1996. And he would never know the men he saved. Had not only survived, but lived. It took some time to process that we would never shake his hand. Give him a hug. Introduce him to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Generations that he saved. We would never get to say thank you to his face. Just a simple thank you. Joe didn't need to be told what to do. He didn't wait. He didn't kneel expecting something to happen. He acted. He acted with no thought other than saving the men on the Arizona from a horrible death. While we walked away slightly disappointed that nothing was settled, we had more hope than we had in a while. Joanne, without your father's intervention, myself and 4 generations would not be here today. You joined the fight and never gave up. You always had faith that the medal would come at the right time. Finally, I want to thank Joe George. You once said that your conscience was your guide that day. You could have gone about your duties and not looked twice at the men who, according to your commanding officer, were dead already. You could have turned away, but you didn't. You chose the impossible. You chose to stand up for men you didn't even know.
While BMC George is receiving this award posthumously, we're privileged and honored to have his daughter, Ms. Joanne Taylor, here with us to accept the award on behalf of her father. Mrs. Taylor, I know you are very proud of your father, so please accept this award on behalf of a grateful nation and a grateful United States Navy. What makes this ceremony even more special, as we've heard through several of the presentations, is the fact that we have 3 USS Arizona survivors present with us today: Mr. Donald Stratton, Mr. Lauren Bruner, and Mr. Lou Connor. There could be no greater testament to Joe George's heroism than that of the Stratton and Bruner families.
God knew on that morning of December 7th, 1941, just what was going to happen. And he knew he would have this larger-than-life man, Joe George, my father, in the place he was for a reason, to save these magnificent men. Don Stratton, Lauren Bruner, Alvin DeVork, Harold Kuhn, Russell Lott, and Earl Reiner, who so desperately needed him in that moment in time. The stories have been told about what was happening to them that fateful morning, their burned bodies, and losing hope that there was going to be any way out to escape that burning inferno of the USS Arizona. My dad, Joe George, stepped up to be the real man he was. At the time, these survivors so desperately needed him. I am so very proud of him that he did what was right and honorable in that moment in time.
With today's ceremony, we honor Bosun's Mate Chief Joseph George, and we cement his rightful legacy among America's greatest heroes. So now the time is here to present the award that we've all been waiting for.
We made it.
We made it.
Chief George, then assisted Vestal in getting clear of the danger posed by Arizona. Were it not for Chief George's actions, all the Arizona sailors would likely have perished. By his initiative, courage, and devotion to duty, Chief George reflected great credit upon himself and upon the highest traditions of the United States.
We did it. We did it. We did it. I can't believe it. We did it.
We did it. We did it. Finally.
We did it. My dad would be really proud because he loved the Navy, and he'd be really proud to receive a medal, but he would not, I don't think he would like all the, the hoopla that goes along with receiving the medal. Now, my mother would be overjoyed with that because she loved my daddy so much. But there's a part of me that knows that he just would be overwhelmed. I've said before that if he knew I was on this quest for him, he would be saying, "Joanne, what are you doing?"
We didn't get it done soon enough so Joe could appreciate it.
A lot of memories.
Yeah.
Well, I knew God had a plan how this was going to pan out. I told Joanne many times, I said, God's going to take care of this. He's going to open up the doors when it needs to be open, and he did.
Of course, Pearl Harbor survivor Joe George would not have wanted a big fuss made over all this. Humble heroes seldom do. He would just say what he did was the correct thing to do. The right man in the right place at the right moment in history, even if it meant disobeying a direct order. On a gray and chilly December day, Joanne Taylor returns to the Little Rock National Cemetery in Arkansas.
I'm so proud of you.
This time, she has brought something with her in a small box. Joe George finally has his Bronze Star Medal with a V for valor. This rambunctious, hard-fighting, hard-drinking sailor aboard the USS Vestal is no longer the forgotten hero of Pearl Harbor. Many generations, here as a result of his actions on the morning of December 7th, 1941, made sure of that.
That is just the best and most wonderful part of it. His legacy is all these people that have come along that are these wonderful families, like the Stratton family, like Lauren, all these people that have come along and forged a life because of my father. So, I mean, that's the most wonderful part of what he did.